I am Joel McLeod.
I'm Roland Hannon.
And welcome to another episode of the 905er. Normally, this is our Thursday roundup episode, and Roland and I would just go through the headlines and start cherry picking a few ideas that we'd riff on. But this is going to be a little bit of a different setup for our listeners. If you recall, Tuesday's episode, we had on HCDSB chair of the board, Patrick Murphy, to discuss what seemed to be a breakdown in board conduct and what the board was doing to rectify that. And we put the episode up on Tuesday morning, as we normally do, and it garnered a bit of attention. We had a number of parents who listened to the episode and had some reactions to Chair Murphy's comments. And one of the parents who were vocal about it is our guest today, Lauren Wallis, who is one of the organizers of a grassroots parents group called Halton Parents for Change. Now, I'll throw it over to her in a bit to explain what the group is about. But we invited her on to give us her take from how the ongoing behavior of the board has been affected by parents on the ground. And so, without further ado, I'm going to throw it open to you, Lauren, and welcome to the 905er.
Thanks for having me.
So, Lauren, let's start off. Can you just introduce your group, Halton Parents for Change, who they are, what they're about, and why you exist?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Halton Parents for Change came together during the Pride Flag debate back in May when Trustee Agnew first tabled the motion. We came together as parents who wanted to support this motion. We were generally in favor of it, saw all the reasons, the obvious reasons that it should be done at the school level. And as that whole debate went on, we all started talking a little bit more and realized we were very aligned with changes that we wanted to see at the board level, mostly around inclusion, not just for the two SLGBTQ plus community within the Catholic system, but generally all marginalized groups. So we sort of came together and said, if we, sort of pool some of our resources and some of our efforts, that we can actually get some traction here, because obviously that was a very charged debate and got a lot of people paying attention. So we came together and formed Halton Parents for Change, and it's been a bit of a wild ride in the last 6 months.
The reason why we had you on is you got shared to a couple Facebook groups yesterday's episode, and I saw your reaction to Chair Murphy's comments on the episode. Tell us what you thought. What's your reaction to his comments on that episode?
Vast, in a word. So, I mean, there were sort of two sides of it. So on the one side, he was talking about the whole trustee conduct piece and the report that he had put forward at the end of June to have a third party do that, to do that report on what was happening at the board. And I thought that report was very insightful, and when he was talking about it on the podcast, I think he generally hit it on the head. I think of the three chairs we've had, he's been the most effective at getting things done and keeping things on track. I'll give him credit there. I didn't think that the accusations that were made against him about being biased were true at all. So I'm glad that he's at least taking the report to heart, and I'm glad that he feels empowered to try to shut down some of that dilatory and frustrating behavior, the tactics that delay proceedings and all that sort of thing that you guys touched on as well. Then on the flip side, you get into what he had to say about how the whole Pride debate went on, and then my view of the podcast changed a bit. It's not a reflection on you. It was goodness, where to even start? I mean, it's a debate that shouldn't have been a debate. It's something that students brought forward. The original motion was brought forward by a non-binary student who wanted to see this change happen at their high school, and it came forward from there. So when he said it's never been brought to the board before, that wasn't true. It's been brought to the board. It just hasn't been brought to the board table. There's never been a board meeting debate about it. But I'm sure if you ask trustees about it, like, flying the Pride flag in June is not a new concept. That's been being done for a long time. And the public boards have been flying it for years. This is not something new. It's something that we've just never done because it's a faith issue, so to speak. So that comment that it's the first time it's been brought to the board table. We need to figure, and when he said we need to figure out if it's right for our board, your students requested it. They told you why they requested it. They told you the importance. There's not a conversation on if it's right for the board. It's something to keep your students safe. And then to expand on that, when he said we need to, when the trustees who were against it, there were a lot of comments in that meeting about having a shared understanding of what the pride flag means. I don't think anybody has a question about what it means. When you listen to the delegations, the ones that were in favor and the ones that were against, nobody said, I don't understand what this means. I don't understand why it's important. They just didn't like what it stood for and didn't like why it was important. And that's why the people who were against it were against it. So this whole shared understanding was like, it's their flag, it's their message. They're the ones who get to dictate it. Your responsibility as a trustee is to listen to your students.
When you see the behavior of the board has been going on for the last year or so, what's your reaction as a parent? And let's be honest, as a taxpayer, as somebody who pays your property taxes go to this board, like, do you have confidence in the board that they have interests of you as a parent of your children who are going to these schools? Do you have confidence that they're going to make the best decisions for what your education needs?
For the most part, nope. The amount of time that's spent discussing things that are not to do with school and the school environment. I mean, Murphy even touched on that. He said most of our discussion is not academic. That's not okay. I started paying more attention to the meetings last year when all the masking was happening in August leading up to kids going back to school. And my reaction as a parent was like, are you kidding me? Like, what am I watching? How is this happening? There are some of the trustees are amazing. I'm thankful for the trustees who do actually seem to stand up for their kids. Trustees Agnew and Guzzo in particular, like, they actually listen to the students and bring forward what those students want. The rest of them are just like, do you even care about the kids? I mean, they seriously act like they just have their own interests and their own agendas they're just trying to fulfill their own agendas.
Ask that actually. Yeah. What are those agendas? And we tend to, I know we certainly have done, we tend to talk about the board as a kind of monolith. And it's clearly not. I mean, it's very divided, and there are kind of well-known characters on both sides. And I won't list them off because I'll miss one, but I'm sure you could. Why do you think, if it's such a sort of peculiar thing that happens on elected bodies, but why do these people choose to get elected, and what are they trying to do if they're just kind of blocking everything and just, what's in it for them? Isn't
that just the $35,000 question? Like, I don't understand why some of these people became trustees. They have no skin in the game. It's like it. I'm trying to find the words to describe it here. I don't know what their agenda is. I can make some guesses, but it would be just guessing. But I mean, we all know that there are groups out there that are very, very right wing and very extra conservative, and as a result, very, very exclusionary of a lot of marginalized groups. And that's across the whole spectrum of marginalized groups. And in a lot of cases, that does also include kids who are in the special education program as well. I think in some ways, even those kids get the short end of the stick. I don't know, the most clear example I can give you was a few months ago where Trustee Carabella tabled a motion to write a letter to the Senate opposing Bill C-7, which was the one that had the clause in it about medically assisted death. And I remember reading that motion and I went, this has nothing to do with school. This has nothing to do with education. We're going to spend however long arguing about this because it's clearly going to be a divisive issue. And this has nothing to do with, it does nothing to do with students. For the most part, it's not affecting students. It has nothing to do with education. Why are you talking about this? And that debate took up a good chunk of the meeting and was awful to listen to. And then just recently, I think, 2 weeks ago, there was another motion to write a letter to support menstrual products in schools. And now Halton Catholic, to their credit, passed that last year. So we already do that. The letter was simply to write a letter to the government to ask them to support it on a province-wide level because not every school board supports it. So there was no downside. If anything, that means that we're going to have to spend less money on it out of our board because the province is going to cover it. Great.
What does it tell you that? I mean, we're talking about trustees that, quite frankly, do not necessarily have a background in education. I think Trustee O'Brien, if I'm to be truthful, does have a background in education. He was a former teacher, but the majority of trustees on the board are not teachers. They have no background in education. They have no experience as teachers or as administrators or any whatnot. And the board does have an awful lot of power. When you look at a school board's power, they own a lot of land across the region. Their budget is huge compared to, people don't really think of it, but the Halton Catholic and the Halton Public School Board budgets are huge. Like, they're more than some of the municipality budgets combined in Halton regions, and so they wield a lot of power in the region. Yet we don't elect former teachers or former principals or any kind of administrator to the board. And I'm wondering, do you see that as a problem in terms of addressing, the very, especially in the age of COVID, the very real cases of getting our schools safe, getting our schools effective? Do you see this as a hindrance?
Not necessarily that if the board doesn't need to be made up of past teachers or past administrators. I don't think to have skin in the game and to, really be paying attention to be sort of caring about the kids and having their best interests at heart, I don't think that is a prerequisite. I think just because you don't have kids in the system doesn't necessarily mean that you couldn't be a good trustee even. Like, I can think of a friend of mine who was just like, maybe I'll just go run. I don't have kids, but I could do a better job than these monkeys. It's like, yeah, you probably could, because you openly care about the kids. And I think as long as you have somebody in that position who is actually putting the students and putting their interests first and not spending their time on alternate right-wing agendas, then you just need people who care. You need people who actually care and are willing to do things. And sometimes it means willing to make hard decisions. The pride flag being one of those decisions. There are going to be times you're going to make decisions that aren't going to be popular, but your job there is not to go and be a populist. Your job is to go and look out for the students and to do right by them.
I was just coming back to you mentioned the menstrual products. What was the outcome of that? So the board had actually already voted in favour, trying to suggest to the province that they should do it at a provincial level. And did the whole board still support that, or what happened there?
No, the motion to write the letter did pass. It was met with objections. Trustee DeRosa didn't think that they should be playing the role of politicians, despite having voted in favor of the C7 letter months prior. He ended up abstaining from voting on the menstrual product letter. And I will point out that in his discussion, he referred to our needy female students when discussing their menstrual needs. So that was fun. And then Trustee Carabella's comment was that, Trustee Carabella's comment was that boards should be able to make decisions based on the needs of their students, because apparently the way that you menstruate in one city differs from another city. So the letter did pass, and I think last I checked, about 80% of school boards had written this letter. So I expect we'll see something coming out of it.
It's almost not so much the decisions. I mean, I almost don't understand why the pride flag debate didn't. The four people who might have supported it, if there was the usual split, didn't kind of push on, because ultimately they do seem to have a majority. It's a 4-3 split. The three people who tend to vote against everything lose, but they just take an awful long time about it. Is that your impression, or is that just my more superficial kind of outsider's view there?
No, I think that the way that the split tends to go is that you've got the minority 4 that were referenced in the report, who tend to vote together almost exclusively, not all the time, but almost exclusively. Those.
5-4, not 4-3. Yeah.
Of the remaining 5, I'd say 3 were sure votes for voting in favor. The other 2 were sort of swings. And for the most part, those 2 tend to vote a little bit more student-centric, but not exclusively. And this was one area where they didn't end up voting with it. I think the amendments that were made, while I didn't agree with the amendment that was brought within the first 5 seconds of the debate to remove the flag from the motion, I am guessing here, but I think that was done in order to try to salvage something out of the motion, because I think the person who put that amendment knew that it was not, that the motion was not going to pass in its state.
Right.
So I can kind of appreciate what happened there, but
on going back to that, I mean, immediately after the board failed to pass the motion or failed to make the decision to raise the flag, a number of schools posted LGBTQ plus affirmative messages to their social media profiles, free from any coercion from board or members. You as a parent, what does that tell you about the state of the Halton Catholic School Board?
That tells me straight up that those trustees who voted against the motion, who were against showing support for these marginalized students, that they're just out of touch and that they don't have student best interest in mind. Full stop. Further to that, it makes me question the, I guess you can say that the competency and the strength and the courage and the leadership of the director, Pat Daly. This was a decision that he could have made on his own. He has the authority to make that decision straight up, to just say that all the schools are going to fly the flag. His counterpart in Waterloo did it. A number of other directors have done it. He could have just made the decision and avoided this whole thing. It did not need to be as charged a debate as it was if he had just done his job as the director of education and said, yeah, our students want this. And then even if he had let it go to the vote first, once you saw the backlash, where there's 54 schools, I believe, in Halton Catholic, and all but 2 posted affirmative messages, and the 2 who didn't don't have active Twitter accounts. So when 52 of your 54 schools post these messages there, and not to mention that OECTA wrote a letter as well on behalf of the staff. So your schools and your staff and your students have all very clearly told you that this is what they want. And as the director of education, you still don't step up and do what they want because you're, afraid of backlash from the trustees. Your job is to protect the students, not to protect the trustees. Step up.
So there's a really important point there that I wasn't aware of. So the director of education, who, again, remind me of the name. It's early in the morning.
Pat Daly.
Pat Daly. The director of education has the ability to just do this, take it away from the elected people's.
Yeah, that's what they did in Waterloo. The Waterloo Catholic, the director just said, well, the policy will now be run through June. We're flying the flag, and
because I mean that's been my kind of take on this all along, is that this has no business coming within 100 miles of a school board elected school board trustee. They have no business talking about gender and sexuality and anything remotely connected to those things. Those are not school board trustee level decisions. Those are things that are decided at a federal level. And which are entirely appropriate then to be implemented by non-elected officials. So, yeah, wow, that's a huge part of this. And I would certainly say that the director of education needs to answer for why he didn't make use of the powers available to him. And maybe that would have made him popular with the trustees, but too bad,
Yeah.
I mean, the last thing you want to do
I would just, to be devil's advocate though, it is his job. Like that, I would argue that the problem being is that you have a school board that's clearly divided and is clearly divisive. I mean, I don't know if I would be wanting to wade into that. I have a question though. Like, it sounds like there's such a divide between the board and parents. That parents are clearly on one side. And your organization is formed to kind of give parents a more clear, concise voice on these issues. Is there a way? I mean, we have the next municipal election coming up next year, where in theory the board could be changed. I'm wondering, do you see a way for the board to bridge this gap between the students and the parents and the teachers and themselves? Is there a way to do that? And is there a path forward that we can kind of heal this divide before we have an election happens?
I really want to be able to say yes, and I just really can't. I mean, the issues that stem from the minority four are deep, and they're not going to change. And I mean, even if you take some of the actions that were called out specifically in that trustee conduct report, like voting against agendas without raising objections, and voting against meeting minutes without raising objections, and raising 1,000 amendments that you know are going to fail simply to run the clock, and then voting to end the meeting early, and then complaining that the reason that the meetings aren't getting done is because the chair has a problem with managing it. Well, no, you ended the meeting. That's the problem. I mean, half the time it's basically a filibuster disguised as other stuff.
Well,
so I don't think that. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say you had a good point there, Lauren. I don't want to lose this while it's in my head. In that report, they point out that you can kind of tell that if you read the report, I do recommend everybody do if you're interested in the story. The author points out, like, there's not really a way to fix this. There's not, like, you can't just change these rules and fix it. What it comes down to is the fact that the board doesn't get along, is what pretty much he writes in the report, if I'm not mistaken. He just writes that, you just have to act better.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing, there is no rule stopping you from saying, I oppose the agenda. Why? Because I just oppose it. I don't want to approve the minutes. Why? Because I just don't want to. Or the constant amendment after amendment after amendment after amendment to decisions, because you're going to lose, but it just runs down the clock, so you can then end the meeting at 10:30 or whenever. In the real world, I don't know what you do for a living, Lauren, but in the real world, if you had a meetings with your colleagues that ended that way,
I'd be fired pretty quickly.
I was going to say, like, I can't imagine any board of any company acting that way. If I was a shareholder or a stakeholder, I'd be appalled, and I'd be saying, no, I want a changing of the guard immediately.
Yeah. Unfortunately, your route for trying to change the guard when it comes to elected trustees, there's almost no recourse. Like, there's really not any recourse for trying to remove trustees or really any elected officials. But at least in sort of the rest of the political world, you can, the leader can choose to kick someone out or whatever. There's nothing like that for trustees. Trustees are self-governing. There isn't a body that oversees them, and only in the most exceptional of circumstances would the ministry get involved. That happened in Peel Public, if you want to go look up what happened there. But really, there's no recourse. Now, the ministry is looking into that, and they have put out a survey asking for stakeholder feedback on how they can manage trustee conduct, basically, and oversight and that sort of thing. That survey is open for another month. It will be posting it on the Halton Parents for Change accounts in the next couple of days. So that's at Halton PFC on all platforms. But we'll be posting a link to that survey for people to fill out. And it definitely should be done. The ministry wants to hear how they can address it, because we're not the only board with issues with trustees.
I kind of feel, there are all kinds of government entities that we have, or public entities that we have, that do not have elected boards. I mean, the police services boards are a great example. Probably much more influential in some ways, and similarly big budgets. Is there any reason why we have to have elected school boards? And isn't it just encouraging the kind of worst kind of behavior by something with, this is, as Chair Murphy said himself, they're not dealing with the curriculum, they're not dealing with the day-to-day operations of the schools. The list of things they're not dealing with is much, much longer than the things they are. So you end up with them chatting about flags and school names, the two things which always seem to come up as contentious, or issues that they have no business even looking at. Can't we just get rid of these idiots? And have some professional people do it, like we do in other places.
Yeah. Wow. I've got like 5 different thoughts in my head right now. Okay. So the thing is that in a board that functions well, like, if you want to see the other side of it, go watch the Halton Public Board meetings. Those meetings are boring. It's like watching paint dry, and that's how it should be. In theory, all the role is supposed to do is provide oversight. And even from personal experience, I spent 5 years sitting on a daycare board. It's a not-for-profit daycare. It has a group of volunteer board of directors to oversee it, basically just to make sure that things are running as they should, and that there's no funny business going on. That's what the elected trustees are supposed to do. They're supposed to just to be there, provide oversight. There are certain things that they do need to approve, so that like policies for the most part, because that needs to have input from. It's an oversight. It's supposed to be outside of the board of directors. The board of directors is supposed to prepare it, but then this group of 9 comes together to be like, "Yep, this all looks good. Off you go." It should be just a super boring, nothing position. There's a reason they get paid peanuts, because it's not supposed to be a full-time job. And that's just not the case at our board. At our board, this is down to so many different factors. It's down to the director not making these decisions themselves. 3/4 of the issues that are coming to the board table, the director should be able to just make that decision, be like, yeah, this is in the best interest of our students, move on. And then you get the minority 4 who bring up 1,000 amendments, who argue about the agenda. In the last meeting, they spent 25 minutes arguing about approving the agenda because one of them claimed it was an illegal agenda. Like, no, it's a 2.5-hour meeting. We spent 25 minutes arguing about the agenda. Super use of time. And this happens every single meeting on every single point. It should just be, here's the stuff that legally we have to go through. You can have some meaningful discussions. You can raise some questions. Like, it's not to saying that, like, yeah, just go and green check mark everything. There is debate to be had, but it's not the debate that we're actually having is not the debate that needs to be had.
So what are you as parents planning to do to make your voices heard on this front? Because it sounds like you're not going to go quietly into the dark on this matter.
No, if they think we're going to just sit back and let this unfold and they've got another thing coming, it's all about next October. It's vote out the dinosaurs. It's get some better people in those chairs who can, if we can get 9 people who are exactly like Trustees Agnew and Guzzo, then this board is going to be fabulous. Because you need trustees like them who watch out for the kids, who listen to them, who take their concerns, who actually care about their best interests and can work with the senior leadership team as well. They all need to be able to work together, and the current trustees just don't want to work with anybody. So for us, it's about raising awareness. I mean, I'll admit that before masking, I had no idea the amount of power that trustees hold. Like, everybody talks about, like, everybody gets out for the federal and provincial elections, and then you come to the municipal and it's like 30% voter turnout. Like, let me tell you, these people have way more effect on your daily life and the lives of your kids than the people you elect at the higher levels. 30% turnout's not good enough. So a lot of it is just a question of raising awareness and letting people know what's actually happening at the board. And in some ways, COVID's actually been, I don't want to say a blessing, but people have been at home and people have been paying attention, and there's been more issues that have been on people's minds, and people have started engaging more. I've started publicly making meeting summaries because I feel like if everybody sits and watches those 4-hour meetings every other week, they're all going to go crazy. So I'm going to take one for the team and summarize those meetings so that you can read it in 5 minutes and not in 4 hours. And it's a lot of awareness. And my whole group of parents it's a fabulous group of parents, and we all just want to do better for our kids.
Well, and that's something that I always say, whenever groups such as yours come together and start challenging elected officials, they tend to react very negatively to that, and they start throwing accusations around. And I dare say you may encounter some of those over the next year. But good politicians welcome this stuff because you're engaged parents. You're there because you care. And if they're any good, they should never fear any of that. They should welcome it with open arms. And more power to your elbows. It certainly, everything you say about paying attention to school board elections and municipal elections is so true, because the number of people who choose their school board trustee by seeing if they recognize a name, and if they don't, just sort of dropping a pin into a map, is I know I've done that over the years, is horrendous. And yet these people are making really, decisions which I don't think they should be making, but nevertheless they're making them. So we should be paying attention.
I totally agree.
I'm noticing that we're coming up on the half-hour mark for this episode. So as a catchphrase for this episode, we could go on for hours on this, but I'm afraid we're going to have to end it there. So thank you very much, Lauren, Lauren Wallis of the Halton Parents for Change, for coming on and sharing the other side of the coin, if you will, on the issue of Halton Catholic School Board trustee conduct. So thank you very much, Lauren.
Thank you very much. You can follow us on all socials at Halton PFC.
Thank you. That's it for this episode of the 905er. Thank you for listening. As always, you can send us your feedback, thoughts, and concerns or ideas for future episodes to our email, info@905er.ca. We love to hear from you. You can help us keep the 905er going by financially supporting us through Patreon as well as PayPal. Visit us at 905er.ca and click on the support tab. As well, links are in the show notes for your convenience. Lastly, you can find us on social media. Search for _905er on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. So long for now. See you next time.